So we're gonna start with the movement in general from Britannica. It's a biography. We're gonna get out of this James Coleman here because this is separate from what. It's not separate. It has to do with it, but that's for after. We're just gonna go with the first part. So we're gonna start with busing, how they started it and why they started it. All right. Busing, also called desegregation busing, in the United States, the practice of transporting students to schools within or outside their local school districts as a means of rectifying racial segregation. Although American schools were technically desegregated in 1954 by the landmark, see, it was already in 1954, it was already, abolished. But they weren't listening to essentially the law that was being enacted already. Although American schools were technically desegregated in 1954 by the landmark, the U.S. Supreme Court decision handed down in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. In practice, they remained largely segregated. You see, even though the law was enacted, there was still segregation. Owing to trends in housing and neighborhood segregation. You see what it just said? Owing to trends in housing and neighborhood segregation. So let's not make this this is already telling you right now that this had nothing to do with race. It's already writing it out for you that it was based on trends in housing and neighborhood segregation. So a neighborhood that had a majority of white people wasn't going to have a lot of blacks, and in a neighborhood with a majority of black people, there was only going to be one or two whites. There weren't going to be many fucking whites in there. So that's what that came down to. That's why there was segregation. Busing came to be the remedy by which courts sought to end racial segregation in the U.S. schools. See, because of the trends in housing and neighborhood segregation, they had built schools closer to the black neighborhoods. Okay, you see how you have to, how for those black families out there, how you have to put your son or your daughter on a bus, and your daughter or your son has to wake up at fucking 7 in the morning, or maybe no, I'm sorry, that's for middle school. What if you're in high school? Your son or daughter have to wake up at fucking 5 in the morning. Excuse my language. They have to wake up at 5 in the morning so they can get to the bus on time and get to school, because to get to school, it's 45 minutes. You understand? Now, there were schools at the time that were built, and yes, the majority of them were black. Yes, absolutely. The majority of them were black. But that's not because white people didn't want them there. That's because that near a black neighborhood or a black area where there were a majority of blacks, like I just said, and there wasn't a lot of white people. You go to the nearest hood, what do you fucking see? You ain't gonna see a fucking lot of white. You see 2 or 3. Same thing here. That you didn't see that many, and in those neighborhoods, they would have a school next to them. You understand? So they didn't have to fucking worry about taking a bus or traveling out 45 fucking minutes away. Do you understand? Busing came to be the main remedy by which the courts sought to end racial segregation in the U.S. schools, and it was the source of what was arguably the biggest controversy in American education in the later 20th century. So here's what you have. You have the school district, they allowed the building of other schools for black neighborhoods because they were closer to their neighborhood in general. They were the closest to their. They didn't have to go out 45 fucking minutes. You understand? Now you have these few people that are saying that's not okay. That building a school closer to you got to a neighborhood that can't that's low income, middle income, and that can't afford to take them out 45 minutes, they're saying that's wrong. That's not good. No, no, no. We need to we need to allow them to get on a bus and go out 45 fucking minutes. You understand? Have their parents wake up at 5 in the fucking morning. So we can charge more fucking money for fucking gas with buses. Do you understand? The school system can make more money. Buses is gas money to take you out 45 fucking minutes away from school. You understand? They can outcharge based on the time and the length and distance it takes to get from point A to point B. Yes, it may not seem like a lot, but that's every day they charge that. Every day. Every day. Every day since 1970 something. Every day. More gas. More gas. What do you think that fucking costs? Who do you think that comes out? Who do you think pays for that shit? Do you think that they actually spend what they say on the gas? Fuck no. All right, let's keep going. In 1896, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Plessy versus Ferguson that segregated public services, in that case railroads, that were separate but equal, did not violate the U.S. Constitution. Okay, so in 1896, that is, of course, that's different. That's segregation. All right, 1954 is one thing. Okay, 1954, it was because of housing trends and because of neighborhood. But in 1896, they allowed a law that allows public services to be segregated, such as railroads and trains and things like that. The ruling was used for decades to defend and support the racial segregation of a variety of public services, including schools. You see, the court overturned itself half a century later in Brown versus Board of Education by declaring the doctrine of separate but equal did in fact violate the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. That's fine and dandy, and I'm perfectly in agreement with that. Perfectly in agreement with that. But I don't think black families were asking to have their child sent 45 fucking minutes away. You understand? I know you black families can agree that you weren't asking. You were not asking. I smoke a lot of weed. You were not asking to send your daughter or your son out 45 fucking minutes away to the nearest white school. Now, here, let me put it to you this way. In 1975, just 10 years prior, a decade prior, segregation had just ended. Like the tension, the racial tension with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and John, all that had culminating together. That was finally dying down. But the black people, the black community, they were still angry. Their hearts were still hardened. No, I'm not going to say they were in the wrong or in the right, but at the end of the day, their hearts were still hardened because of what had just happened a decade prior. You see, you've had time to, like the communities have had 50, 60 years to heal. But back then, it was 10 years after. You understand? It was 10 years after. it was still fresh for them. They weren't looking to move, and let's be honest here, you know this. They weren't looking to move their motherfucking kid to a white fucking school where they had just got recently a decade back been fucking treated like shit for. You understand? They weren't looking for that. They weren't asking for it. But these people, this government, decided that they were the fucking answer. They were your heroes. They were there for you. They were your hero. You know, they are there to support you. Bullshit. Bullshit. This whole court case that I'm reading right here with you guys. I apologize. They had broke recently and I still wanted to make this video anyway. I still wanted to make this video today before it got cold. So, back to what I was saying. This whole court case cost money. Everything I'm reading to you cost money for the courts. It's money. It's all about money. They're using the segregation. They're using your rights and everything as a means to make money. Biden's saying what he said. Are you kind of like already starting to see where I'm getting at here? We're like repeating the past here in 2023 and in 2022. Everyone's talking about how they're flipping the subject or they're using something to pit us against each other and to make money off of it. Well, that's the same thing they're doing here if you're reading correctly. That's what Biden had already seen. Hey, you understand? Are you starting to see now? Back then, he was actually fucking, if you want to call him slowing out, he was thinking on top of his game. Because if you want to think about it, they were trying to fucking make money off of fucking, off of the fucking segregation. These people had nothing to do with it. These people were white people. They're using their fucking, they're saying we're the heroes, you know, we're gonna get your rights back. They're gonna fucking fight for you instead of letting you fight for yourself. Okay. So let's go back and let's keep reading. While the Swan case dealt with schools, it would be nearly 2 decades before the courts enacted practices to enforce the desegregation established by Brown and Swan versus Charlotte Mecklenburg Board of Education. The Supreme Court let stand the practice of using mandatory busing to racially integrate schools. While the Swan case dealt with schools in the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, the ruling had far-reaching implications because it allowed the practice to continue in multiple cities across the United States. The court subsequently placed limitations on Swan when it ruled in Milliken versus Bradley that mandatory busing across school district boundaries could be implemented only where it could be shown that districts had enacted policies that caused the original segregation. Okay, so that's fine. That's perfectly fine. You see, to avoid, in 1974, I want to explain what Biden signed to you now, okay? What Biden signed federally, all right, in 1974, this is what this is explaining. The court subsequently placed limitations on Swan. That was because of the implementations that Biden had signed. Now, there's a reason why he signed it, and I want to explain it because I don't like when people bullshit. And the problem is right now media is already trying to see how media was against Trump, and now they're against Biden. they're against or for anything and whoever you guys get excited for. Do you understand? So don't fall into their bullshit. Start reading documents, in fact, like I'm showing you here. This is court law. This was in court when I'm reading you. Now, what Biden had signed and implemented was so they could not make money off of this shit here. You see what I was telling you? How they were trying to make money. They were trying to. They were doing it for a couple years already, where they were taking schools that were opened already, black schools that were near you. They were closing them down, not making them accessible to black communities like they used to be, and now making you drive out 45 minutes to a white fucking school. Do you understand? Do you get it now? Are you getting it? These black communities that were already having a racial divide because of the decade that had just previously passed in the decade ago, that everything that had just happened, you're now putting them with the people there right now they don't want to be fucking close to, and they don't want their kids to be close to them right now. At least then they were still sore, they were still healing, they still needed time, and you're pushing them in. Opponents of forced busing argued that they were forcing it. Opponents, that's the thing. You see how Jordan, I'm not sure if it's Pierce or Jordan. Shoot. Give me a second, guys. While we look this up together. I don't want to get his name wrong and explain this the wrong way, so you guys don't. And I know it's gonna pop up on here. Okay, I think it's Jordan Peterson. I just want to be sure. Yeah. Okay. You see how Jordan Peterson says that he's against using pronouns because the government's trying to force it? You see what he said? He said, I don't mind using he, she, whatever he or she would like to be called as. I don't mind calling him or her or he or she. I don't mind it. I mind that the government is enforcing me to do it. You see, those were his words. You see, and I get that. He doesn't want to be forced by the government like a dictatorship to do something. And that's why he's refusing to do it now. If it was never put, if the court had never said anything, nothing, never mentioned it, and someone got on TikTok and said, Jordan Peterson, could you please call me the so-and-so? And he was just asking politely, just asking. Jordan Peterson would have done it. He would have had no problem. The problem is they forced it. And there's the same thing here. You're forcing something. The problem is they forced it. He don't want to be forced. People don't want to be forced by the government to do something. Do you understand? They don't mind it if they're asked. But to be forced, it's like a dictatorship. Okay? And that I understand. And that's what they were trying to do here. They were trying to force it on the black community. Opponents of forced busing argued that the neighborhoods to which children were being bused were unsafe and that the children's overall education would suffer as a result. It had nothing to do with race. It had to do with the fact that because a decade had it was just only a decade, it was still fresh and in the black community's minds, they would stab and kill the first white person. Let's be honest here. And the first white person they saw at the time, because they didn't fucking want nothing to do. They were not happy. Not happy at all. They objected to the increased time it took to transport children to and from school, which they claimed reduced the amount of time available for them to study and do homework. You see, they said that the black community would not have time to study and do homework if they spent 45 fucking minutes on a bus. Do you see? There were also concerns about the budget impacts of operating greater numbers of buses and other means of transportation for longer distances each day. In many cases, middle and upper class white residents began moving out of urban areas affected by mandatory busing and settling in surrounding suburbs. Because the black community, after it being fresh in their minds, okay, let's get it right here, in their minds, after 10 years, they had just been fucking hosed down. They're beating the shit out of fucking, you understand? I mean, let's be real here. This is not racially motivated, this is real. You guys know this is fact, this is history. The fact is that they were treated like shit back in the 60s. The fact is, 10 years later, they weren't fucking over it yet. And they're moving these people in, you understand? And they're fucking knocking the sense out of these fucking white people because they're fucking still got it fresh in their mind. This exodus, known as white flight, made it difficult for districts to meet their obligations under court-ordered desegregation. Additionally, whites who opted to stay in the urban areas were more likely to enroll their children in private or parochial schools. Even after the desegregation, even after the government had all those court filings, everything they done, it was a waste of fucking time. It was a waste of fucking time. Because, do you see what this says? It didn't help. It made it difficult for districts to meet obligations. It made it difficult for districts to meet their obligations under court-ordered desegregation. You see, they couldn't do it. They could not. It was not successful. Even after, not successful. Biden thought they were just money. It was money. By the late 1980s, that is what he meant by racial jungle. I'm going to explain that remark to you with another article. We're gonna speed this up as fast as possible. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, mandatory busing was slowly disappearing across the United States as a result of changing housing patterns. Okay? Although a handful of school districts remained under such court orders, the legacy of busing remains controversial. While opponents argue that forced busing did little to change the racial makeup of schools, proponents counter that such extreme measures were necessary to finally implement the reforms directed by Brown. So it had nothing to do with it actually helping anything. Do you see what they said? The opponents said that it did little to change it. Opponents or proponents, people that were for it, say, doesn't matter. Now we're going to get to James S. Coleman. This is very important, guys. I want to read this to you because I want you to know about this man and what he said. and what he changed his mind about. I want you to read this. James S. Coleman and Full James Samuel Coleman. He was born in 1926. He died in 1995. He was a sociologist. He was a pioneer in mathematical sociology whose studies strongly influenced education policy in the United States, okay? He's a big deal. He received a BS from Purdue and a PhD from Columbia. Big fucking deal, you understand? Big fucking deal. Where he was a research associate in the Bureau of Applied Social Research. While there, he influenced by the style and ability of Paul Lazarsfeld to stimulate creative problem solving. An influence decision, like we creators do, an influence demonstrated in two major works, Introduction to Mathematical Sociology and Mathematics of Collective Action.